Okay, so I think now we are on live. So hello everyone, good morning. Today is the 5th of May 2020. My name is Hongya Wu, also known as Isaac, if you prefer an English name. So today, as usual, as my two previous video is all about community interpreting again. So today I will be going to more of broad term, okay, about what types of interpreting that are existing here in Melbourne, and what are we expecting to do as an interpreter in each types of interpreting. Okay, so broadly speaking, there are two types of two sort of big formats of interpreting. One is face to face. Another one is either telephone or video conferencing. These are the two broad categories. And today I will be only talking about face-to-face interpreting and what kind of type that is involved in these interpreting scenarios. So let's start by the most common one, consecutive interpreting, or also known as dialogue interpreting. So these are very common, or the most common type of interpreting that exists as a community interpreter like myself. What it involves is, you probably can guess, is that they are either one or few parties that sit together face to face, and yourself as an interpreter, that you sit together face to face, and then what they do is it's more like a Q&A sort of session. The doctor will say something, or the police officer will start. Say they will finish uttering one or few sentences at the maximum. Then you listen to what they say, you understand it, and then you utter it in another target language, such as Mandarin or Cantonese. So these type are the most common one. So the consecutive types of interpreting is most commonly seen in police station, in hospitals, clinics, at schools, community centers, or any everyday involved activities. To do this, basically, once again, I start with the most common one, the medical aspect of interpreting, where you, as an interpreter, you go into a room with the doctors or the nurse or the clinicians sitting on one side, and then your client who speaks little or no English sit on the other side. So it's more like a triangle kind of sitting plan. And usually the doctors or the professional will sit by his or her laptop or computer, and the other person will sit right across from the professional or English speaker, and you sit right in the middle between the two of them. So consecutive interpreting, this format, I would say, is the easiest format, probably, of all type of interpreting. So all you need to do is, you can even prepare yourself by having a piece of notes, and you can have a pen and paper or pencil. So you can, what they do is one person will speak one or two or three sentences, or then you listen to it, you jot a few notes such as date, time, name of medications, and then what you need to do is you understand what party A said, and then you interpret it to party B. This is your consecutive interpreting. So this is the easiest part. So one speak, you interpret, and then second one will listen, and then this person will reply, and then you understand and interpret, and then party A again will understand. So this is like a dialogue, okay? These two are having a dialogue, but due to language barrier, they need to go through you as the bridge, as a mouthpiece, so that they can understand each other. This is the easiest, I would say, the most commonly seen type of interpreting in a community interpreting settings. So it is quite common. I do it almost on a daily basis, before the pandemic, of course, and even I do it now occasionally. Some of them Even now, when we do interpreting through phones or video conferencing, dialogue, consecutive interpreting, it is still 95% of what I do is through this one. Okay, so this is a consecutive. Second type, now comes to number 2, is known as whispering interpreting or chuchotage, which is a French word, means whispering. Okay, now this type of interpreting is commonly used where one party speaks non-stop. Okay, this is most commonly seen in court cases where the lawyer, the judge, the witness, the police officer, the court officer, he or she may be reading a like a piece of document. Yeah, like they have a statement need to read, a recap, or any sort of what the police officer may be talking about, or what they got on the statement, or the defense lawyer may have their opening and talk about what his or her argument are. So this type of scenario, usually they wouldn't be stopping sentence or few sentences at a time. They will try to slow down a little bit so that you have a little bit more time to interpret. And usually the lawyer will be able to, understand if he knew that one party speaks a different language than English, and the judge will sometime or to remind whoever is speaking that speak in a slower pace or have occasion pauses for the interpreter to interpret. So, but they will not put the microphone right at the interpreter and for the interpreter to interpret everything that this person said or read out of a document. Instead, I, as an interpreter, will be sitting with the person who require interpreting service right next to each other. Okay, so we are right next to each other, shoulder by shoulder, and I will do chuchotage, whisper interpreting, right next to this person in a much lower volume. And then when the officers or the lawyer are reading out documents or talking or arguing, or they are rebuttaling each other, I will be talking in a very quiet voice and talking to my client and interpret what they say, and in a very low voice, I will be understanding what everyone else are talking about on the court, and I will be interpreting what I heard to my client right next to him or her in a very low volume and simultaneously speaking to this person. So there's almost no pause, or maybe there's very short pauses where they will not look at you, because as etiquette, you need to look at the judge when you speak on court. So they wouldn't look at you. They probably wouldn't tell whether you finish or not. They will just speak to the judge in a slower, shorter manner. And what you need to do is you have to sit behind the speaker, right across from the judge in front of you, and you have to speak in a low voice, whispering to your client while interpreting. So this is our chuchotage. That happens a lot in the community settings. This may also happen in a medical setting where the doctors or the physicians and the patients, they actually understood each other. They speak English. However, the families, such as parents or children, they want to just participate, sit in and know what's going on and want to know how to help out. So usually the patients and the doctor who understood each other will sit face to face with each other, and they will speak to each other, of course, sometimes in a slower pace. And I will be sitting next to the family members who doesn't speak English, and I will be whispering, once again, whispering what they say. And then so that everyone in the room will understood what's going on. So these are the second type. A third type of interpreting that I'm going to talk about, this is very common in medical cases. Unlike the police who like to have everything recorded and be formalized, in the medical sense, where if there is a piece of document, such as instruction, for the patients, such as whenever you go to dental clinic, right? Someone just had one of his or her teeth extracted, and usually the dentist will provide a small piece of instruction on what to do or what not to do, such as if you feel too painful, you can take painkiller, or you shouldn't be drinking hot water, you shouldn't be eating anything too cold, you shouldn't be moving too much. That was due to anesthetic. They put numbing gels on your teeth, so your mouth wouldn't be feeling anything for the next an hour or 2 hour, so that you shouldn't be eating anything too hot, so it might burn your lips. So these are instructions on a piece of paper that you have to interpret for your client. Usually, if you do understand English, you will read it by yourself on your way home or once you got home. But since the client, a lot of them are either young children or elderly person who do not speak or understood any English. So this piece of document will be handed up to the interpreter, and I, as an interpreter, will be, reading through this piece of document, a few sentences on the top, and I will be understanding what is said on the document and tell my client what the content of this piece of document are. So he or she will able to understand what's written on this piece of document. Usually, the patient will keep this piece of document of instruction. So maybe the families or friend can reiterate again once they got home. But usually, we will have to first do a sight translation for the client. Also, before any procedure, there are anesthetics involved, there are risks involved, there are procedural matter that involved that the doctor would definitely have to ask about. Or what's your health condition? Do you have any existing conditions? Do you have any medication that you have to take regularly? Or these kind of things. Of course, ideally speaking, as an interpreter, you should always ask the nurse they should be the one who's carrying this consent form or a questionnaire. So they should be speaking, reading out, and you as the interpreter should be just listening and interpreting what the nurse was saying. However, this might not always be the case. It may be that the nurse were too busy, so they just give you this piece of document. Say, here's other instructions for anesthetic, for tooth extraction, for the what to do after the operation. So you just have to grab this piece of paper and do sight translation. You read out the sentence in English, and then you try to interpret what is said into your own language. This is a very common phenomenon in medical interpreting. So this is a sight translation. And the next type of very commonly seen interpreting, I will call it transcribing. This is not very it's like not every day, but these are usually involving with authorities such as police or customs or national security. What these usually involve is that maybe the police will have a recording, either from a dialogue or from a telephone exchange, or a audio record. Or nowadays, the Chinese community, they use WeChat, and on WeChat or on even Messenger, they have this voice function where you just press on the button. You have up to 60 seconds to talk, and then they will record your voice and send to your friend on Messenger. So these are the type where they will actually keep the phone or any electronic device of that particular person, and they will play all these audios, or they will let you read all these messages or even screenshots to the officers next to you. And these are sight translation, where you're basically reading off a screen, listening off a audio, and then you will just have to interpret what is said here. And sometimes, for example, here on the screen they will have something like, office use only, my golf, this kind of thing. And then this will say that today I will be going to ABC, to collect apple from whoever that is, and then you just have to read, understand, and sight translate to the officer next to you. This is very common in police or custom scenario. A lot of them nowadays, you can see a lot of problem with smuggle tobaccos or cigarette products from overseas without paying the duty. So a lot of the exchange between the different parties involved, they are through WeChat, and a lot of them are in written messages or voice messages. So you have to listen or read them and do sight translation to the officers next to you. So and after that, there are another type is called transcribing, which I don't involve a lot. I think I only done it once. This is I would say a more challenging one, where they'll put you at a very quiet place as an interpreter. You sit there. Your client could be a lawyer, could be police, could be border protection. You'll be sitting in a place, in a quiet place. You might have a headphone on, and they'll play what was said between two or more people. Usually, it is a audio record, so you have to listen to it. Then you will take notes, and then you will write down what it is, and then you can just once you write down the notes, and then you can just directly interpret what was said on the audio, and the police officer would just type up, or any sort of authority officer would type up what you said on the document, on their own little iPad or their laptop, so they can record whatever is said in the video or in the audio setting. So this is I haven't done too much of that, but I think a few years ago I've done a few for the border protection, for the custom as well, and they sometimes will ask you. They will start by asking you to go by what they say. You will just do audio transcribing, and then they will sometimes tell you to type as well. But this usually done at your home, and you can listen over and over again if necessary, and then understand what is said in the audio and type it out on a piece of paper, and then you will produce this piece of document of transcription from what you heard and give it to your client. That's another type of interpreting. The last one, this is what you call the apex of interpreting, is known as conference interpreting. Conference interpreting is something that I have never involved formally. I might have done it through a private section with a friend of mine. I've actually done one for one of my friends. His name was Alex. It was actually a very informal conference where it was just some students from China, and they were talking about their debating skills and on particular topics. And at the time, I was just a student studying at RMIT University, taking my interpreting and translation degree, and I was sitting right next to my friend here, sitting next to Alex, and I was listening to what's going on the stage, and I would just whisper to Alex. However, in the real scenario is the interpreter who participate in conference interpreting, they will be sitting in a box, like a box kind of thing, where it will be much more quiet. Someone will sit next to you as an interpreter. So what they do is there are always two interpreters sit next to each other, and they all had a headphone on, and there will be a button. So you will be listening to what the person speaks on the stage, usually a long statement or giving out a speech. Then you will be speaking into a microphone simultaneously as what's going on. That's how it was also known as simultaneous interpreting. And your clients wouldn't be sitting next to you. They will be actually outside somewhere, on the audience seat, and they will have a headphone on, and you'll be speaking into a microphone, and then what you said will be go through the system and through into their earphone, and they will hear what you said. So these are simultaneously interpreting what is said on the stage to your client, and these type of interpreting is very challenging. It's you have to be very quick. You probably have to do a lot of preparation before you start interpreting. Well, this is true for all sort of interpreting, but this conference interpreting is particularly important. You might even need to ask your client what he or she is going to say. They might have a transcript for you, or they might have whatever they are going to say. They might give you any documents previously. Actually, I've seen it myself. For the one of the church conference as well, some of the interpreters who I would say are well prepared, they ask for the PowerPoints, the scripts from the speaker, so they actually had quite a fair good idea of what to expect. So they had all the document right next to them, and then they will know what's going on next, what's going to happen next. So they will just go by. However, there are cases where it's on that day when they were talking about osteoporosis, and the conference interpreter, who wasn't a professional, she didn't understand what osteoporosis is. So you can see a lot of block off. Whenever the word comes out, it wasn't properly interpreted, and for the rest, less important things such as be careful of your diet. You should always have a lot of sunlight. These kind of less important aspects were properly interpreting. So in a conference interpreting, you don't have the freedom, you don't have the discretion to ask the speaker to slow down or to stop for you, or to ask question. Whereas in dialogue, in a everyday community interpreting between your clients or doctor or police officer in a consecutive phenomenon, you can actually ask them to slow down. You can ask them to repeat. You can ask them to explain themselves if you don't understand. You can even pause them and take out your smartphone, and you can go on Google and to find out some definitions of words. These is not available in a conferencing interpreting scenario. Back to what I said previously, in a court case scenario or in a police scenario, most things are in a dialogue base, especially in the inquiry, like questioning period, where the lawyer or the defense lawyer or the prosecutor, they will ask a sentence, they'll ask the question. It's usually short, usually pretty precise, and you as an interpreter can always jot down the key points, or you don't even need to jot down the key points and interpret alternatively. So these are much easier and much more common. So now here is basically the format of interpreting. I would say that's basically it. Now, what type or agency that may be involved in interpreting or community interpreting? I've previously mentioned it, but I'll give you a list right now. For the consecutive interpreting, mostly are hospitals between patients and the doctors, schools, parents, student and the teachers, and in home visit, of course, and also in the clinics, between police officers and the person who's giving a statement. These are very common as well. And also you in a tourist scenario where a tour guide may be talking. I've actually done one before with a tour guide where they'll go around different sceneries, and we went to a lot of sightseeing. I was following the tour guide to the Brighton Beach in southeast Melbourne, and the person will be talking. The tour guide will say, "Oh, these are the houses, small little huts here, known as the Rainbow Hut," and she will be pausing every couple minutes and or couple seconds, and I will be able to interpret what she said. That's consecutive interpreting. So government agency are very common. A government agency is probably the only time where you will be involving in sight translations, such as public hospitals, police, and customs, or border protection. Whereas private clients, such as business clients or those who needs a interpreter to go to a hospital, I don't see that many sight translation involved. So that's basically it. This involves, once again, I do a wrap up. So as an interpreter who works in a community interpreting background, you need to expect consecutive or dialogue interpreting. You might have to do chuchotage, whisper interpreting. You most likely will have to do sight translation, reading out from a piece of paper and interpret it on the spot into your language. You might have to involve in transcribing, especially in police, border protection, custom case, and unlikely, but possibly after enough training and when you acquire a higher certification as a conference interpreter, you might have to go to a conference interpreting. And relevant agencies are mostly police, medical related, such as doctors, clinics, hospitals, home visits, schools, business, and also private clients, aged care, child care, and victims of family violence. Those are very common. These things require you to have a good understanding of both languages, note-taking skills. You need to write down or remember. If you couldn't, you can write down some keywords of what one party was saying on a piece of paper or your notepad, and you can use that as a cue to remind you of what this person just said, especially if it was quite long, 3 or 4 sentences or even more. Then you can interpret, and you need to have a thorough understanding of how things are going. And there's one thing a lot of people might get a little bit overlooked. They may overlook the importance of sitting. As an interpreter, you will always, ideally speaking, you should always be sitting at a spot where you can see both of your clients or all of your clients at once. So if there was a doctor and a patient, you should be sitting on a triangular sort of setting where you sit in the middle, the doctor on one side, usually on my right side, and then the patients on another side, or the family on the other side. So you can see both of them, and you don't have to turn around like this. You can just look at them like this. Okay, it actually saves your time, saves your energy. It might sound very small, but it really, really helps. So in a consecutive interpreting scenario, you do need to be aware of these. So now, after talking about face-to-face interpreting, as I mentioned before, there are other type of interpreting, such as telephone interpreting, video conferencing. These are getting more and more common nowadays. Especially where everyone are staying at home and everywhere are locking down. So on the next video, I will be talking about my experience in telephone interpreting or video conference interpreting, and talking about what to be aware of. So stay in tune, and I will see you next week. Thank you very much.